Hey, Allison. We weren't planning on leaning on you, but we will since you showed up.
I can just hang out and help if I'm needed.
Yeah, well, it looks like a small crew, and maybe folks will come and go, which is fine. Um, so welcome everybody. The idea for this office hours is to be informal, and to the extent that we can do this virtually, we would really like to create an air of open questions, kick the tires on this RFP we're going to talk about, come and go as you need to. And if you know folks at your institutions who may not be on the call right now, you can certainly text them and have them join. We really just want to clarify the intent of this particular grant project at Hope. And then we will go through background of the funding opportunity, how we expect to award it, objectives and key points, and anything else that might come up from your specific instances or questions. So to get started, hopefully you know that the Hope Foundation for Cancer Research is the philanthropic arm of SWOG, or the charitable arm of SWOG. And our primary intent is to raise money to support the group and work that SWOG does from its research. Now that could mean anything from fellowships to actual translational medicine and blood draws to broader infrastructure efforts like this NCORP Pilot Grant opportunity. So we've been around since 1993 supporting SWOG, and you're welcome to check out the website. I think that's always the best information to get the scope of what we do, so I can spare you that information right here, but thehopefoundation.org. You're also welcome to either reach out to myself or to Morgan, who's up with the red hair up there, Morgan at thehopefoundation.org, or Joe at thehopefoundation.org. So Morgan, do you want to talk a little bit about what else, if anything, I left off for the intent today?
Oh, sure. Hi, Morgan Cox here. I work with Joe, Director of Communications and Development. So part of my job in a large way is helping programs like this new NCORP Pilot Grant Program to come to be, design them, help launch them, help make sure that they run successfully. So yeah, we're going to go over a little bit of background, how this funding opportunity came to exist, what we're looking for in the applications and how they can be applied for. And then we will open it up for any Q&A thereafter.
And I think we'd be remiss to not introduce Allison. So Allison, do you want to introduce yourself and your role in this entire project
Sure.
and beyond?
Sure. I am Allison Caban Holt, and I am the chair of our recruitment and retention committee. My role is multifaceted, but we're involved right now. Hope has been incredibly generous in a number of initiatives having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's been really important and a great focus for us right now. I have helped craft some of the language for this pilot project, and here to assist in any way. This is a first set of this particular kind of pilot project, and so in some ways we're leaving things somewhat flexible because this is so new, and we don't want to stem the creativity, but we do have some standards for what is being looked for in this project. So just glad to have an opportunity to talk about it more and answer questions.
Cool. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks.
So just to give you a 2-minute background on the intent of this RFP and sort of how it came into being. And I know that DEI, right, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are certainly buzzwords these days, and it's certainly part of the mainstream paradigm, which is great. I think we will all agree that those are really important topics that we want to be sure are part of our everyday language. But I know at Hope and SWOG and beyond, folks are really interested in taking that out of a buzzword category and into pragmatic action and change, right? So they're buzzwords, and obviously something that people are beginning to talk about. And one of the impetuses of this RFP was to actually provide resources to make this happen. And it's actually phase 2, or sort of the second phase of a broader initiative. And I should also mention that this NCORP and Pilot Grant project is couched within a much broader world of diversity, equity, and inclusion work that's happening at SWOG. That is both leadership facing in terms of training and capacity to actively listen and engage with diverse populations as leaders within SWOG and members within SWOG, as well as our patient population, and how things like you know, the racism that can be inherent in something like eligibility criteria that maybe that's never been pushed, to broader issues like how can we communicate more effectively with diverse populations. It's obviously an enormous undertaking, and this is our small way of having an idea, being able to actively listen to your ideas as SWOG membership, and then be able to give you some money to actually do it, because that's usually where the wheels fall off, right? We could theoretically talk about this stuff all the time, but we're absolutely not interested in doing that. We would much rather put up funding. And in this case, I do also want to recognize the role that Genentech has played in helping us get these projects off the ground. They're a lead supporter in helping us pass money through to you to actually make sure that there are resources for what heretofore has always been underfunded work, right? If funded at all, has been unfunded work, I should say. And we really want to start to move the needle in that regard as well. So all of this began this spring with a special symposium that we hosted that was called the NCORP Special Symposium, Improving Representation in Cancer Clinical Trials. And that was a unique opportunity of gauging primarily the MU NCORP population, of which there are 14. 8 of those sites presented their active strategies for engaging and interacting with diverse populations about clinical trials. So it was really an opportunity to see how folks are successfully doing this in their communities, because if we want to understand one thing, it's that as a clinical trials entity, SWOG does not know everything, but our membership has certainly touched and done everything. So if we can listen to those who, within specifically the MU NCORP program, have been doing this for decades, the first place we need to start is by listening to what they have to say. And then, is there a way that we can take those strategies, digest them, maybe rethink about them collectively, and then scale them within a national clinical trial scope like we do at the NCTN. And so that was really what we were hoping to get out of May. It was amazingly successful. Morgan posted the recording to that symposium in the chat. And then this is the phase 2. So we wanted to grow that momentum of these sites sharing their experience and their expertise, and then let that be sort of food for thought for different investigators, where we could create multidisciplinary teams to scale or develop new approaches. And then we get to fund those in these NCORP pilot grant opportunities. So the application deadline, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the actual program in a moment. I'm going to hand it over to Morgan. But we've got a December 1 deadline. And just so you know, we'd be looking at somewhere about a March 1 start date for these projects. So that would be March 1, 2022. You know, candidly, we are flexible, and there's always some give or take there depending on how things pan out. But that is how things are outlined right now. Morgan is also posting the RFP opportunity in the chat right now, so she can take us through it, right? Morgan, do you want to just talk through sort of the objectives and key points of that RFP?
Yes, so I posted a link to the main page around the entire initiative. And then this last link is what leads to the RFA and more on the program itself. So getting into the actual objectives, what we're looking for. And as you mentioned, Joe, the symposium was really inspirational for coming up with the design of this request for proposal, because we were able to learn so many great things that are already happening, strategies in action. And so one of the things we decided was going to be key with this new grant opportunity was the chance to try to scale some of this work. So if you do navigate yourself to the RFA either now or later, you'll see stated objectives that talk about what kinds of projects would be fundable. Things that are establishing infrastructure, testing interventions, removing structural barriers, things that are measurable and action-oriented. So not just describing an issue, but actually proposing a way to overcome the issue and test out a new way of going about accruing patients. Something that challenges or seeks to shift current paradigms. It would also tell us how the effort's going to be communicated to patients or other stakeholders. So we really want to see, you know, what is it and what's it going to look like in action, and something ideally that would be scalable. So if we learn that this is a really great proposal, the project works, it gets off the ground successfully, and it really helps patients in one location. We'd be so excited to see this scale up to other sites across the network. And we just noted in there that we're not looking for anything that's solely seeking to validate an existing problem. We've got, thanks to years and years of research by our amazing investigators, a pretty good body of evidence already that problems exist. So we're looking to take action. We decided it was really key to try to get teams that are multidisciplinary. So we're encouraging that. We've put it right there in the RFA that we're looking, we are looking for a PI who is an NCTN NCORP investigator, but this person could work with a team that includes a nurse, clinical research staff, statisticians, maybe advocates, community groups. So there aren't necessarily any requirements in terms of team size, but we are very interested in seeing diverse teams that are kind of going to pull everyone together into this effort. Even though the grants are not huge grants, but even in the small scale, you could really have a diverse team. And that kind of leads into eligibility. We do want to see one PI or more, one PI who's an investigator and a member of any NCTN group. So this is being brought, presented to the network through SWOG, but it is actually open across the National Clinical Trials Network. What else? Yeah, I think the online resources I was going to mention, I've already pasted links to in the chat. They're $50,000 grants. Joe, I think we were going to mention, and we have some typical frequently asked questions, but one of them is indirect cost allowance, and it is our policy foundation-wide, all programs, 25% limitation on IDC.
So before we get into the sort of nuts and bolts of it, Allison, is it, not to put you on the spot, but anything that we missed or other things that you want to make sure are clear in terms of sort of the intent of the RFP?
I think I would want to make sure to emphasize maybe maybe number 3 of the objectives in terms of being action-oriented and measurable. So we really don't want just descriptive, like, oh, this is a problem. Yeah, we got that. Now we want to make sure that we are able to evaluate change. So not just a project that describes something or describes an issue, but really does have some measurable outcomes. And then I think the other thing is about being scalable. So again, you know, whatever we learn, it needs to be based in maybe something that can then be translated to other locations. So not just a project that is very specific to your specific, you know, location, but then we can't translate it to any other location. But what are the lessons learned that can be larger than just in your specific city or in your specific situation? What are the greater lessons that then can be disseminated to other locations? So I think those are the two things that I thought of. Morgan covered them, but I definitely think they're important.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and let's then move this a little bit more conversational, because I think that's nice. I always like to try to give examples. I don't know why I'm one of those thinkers who sometimes thinks in the tangible realm. It's a little bit more straightforward. So if I can, I am not an investigator, so let me give that caveat. But I have sat through a couple of these office hours and enough of the RFP sessions to understand some things that may or may not be appropriate. And at this moment, I haven't thought about this either, so it's off the top of my head. But I recall a conversation this summer we had with an investigator who was talking about, it was actually a CRA, who was talking about at her site in New Mexico, one of the predominant problems was around the informed consent process for non-English speaking populations. And the consent themselves were either translated or translators were available pretty regularly. But she had noticed that one of the things that were quite prohibitive and very exclusionary to that patient population was that all of the additional materials, maybe the videos or the patient brochures or just other collateral associated with the informed consent process on a trial, none of that was translated. So sort of nobody had thought about beyond the actual ICF document. And a situation like that, you know, is what happens if we start to translate those sort of level 2 ICF documents, all of the attachments that a patient is given under the additional supporting documentation in the consent process, to make sure that that entire process is in fact transparent and is in fact inclusive to patients in whatever background they're coming from, because it's nothing short of a huge knowledge gap on our side of the street for promoting trials that don't include materials that are translated every way we would need a patient to get them, so they can feel empowered to make a choice that's right for them. And that's a situation where, so you translate, right, the additional documentation associated with the ICF, and that can happen at a number of other sites throughout the country, right? Even that, let's just say we're talking Spanish speaking in New Mexico, predominantly we were, but you know, that can be in any language in any region of the US, but they can use sort of either PRO, patient reported outcome tools, to talk there, or you know, you can otherwise track benchmarks pretty clearly in terms of collecting data associated with that enrollment without having to run an entire new trial in and of itself. So
that's a great example. That was a good example. Yeah, I think a lot of the presenters touched upon patient navigation and just different ways that they were approaching that at their particular sites. And some of them had come up with really creative ways. The recording of that symposium is still up and available on our program page. And I think it's really helpful if someone hasn't seen it. I think it provided me a lot of great insight.
And adding to what, to the example that Joe gave, the ability to measure and, you know, putting these materials out, you know, what was the engagement and enrollment of Spanish-speaking people, and then after that, what would be the enrollment of those, you know, of Spanish-speaking participants, and you at least have a way to measure a change. So, so adding that too.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is research, right? So it needs to be grounded in data, and that's how we, as a research network, you know, we're evidence-based, and so it's a process of making sure that we're all for just doing good too, but there's a rollout effect. Also, ultimately, when you get enough data, right, you can get funding to go with that to really amp up and further scale. So we like to make sure that we're doing that all the way through our projects.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I don't know if we did mention that we're framing this to be a multi-year process, right? So we had one symposium and we're offering this first round of grants, but ideally this will be something that continues in subsequent years and we can keep building upon the foundation that's established.
I think that was something that was asked in a prior office hours as well, was could a site or a PI submit two different proposals? And I think that they can, but they have to be different.
Yeah.
Two different proposals. They had two great ideas.
Right.
All the power to you. We in foundation speak, we just say they need to be scientifically distinct.
Yeah, and it happens in other programs where we've received multiple submissions in a year from the same group, same team.
So do we want to blast through just some of the facts? I also want to welcome anybody else to interrupt.
Yeah.
I love being interrupted.
Well, if nothing else, we'll have this recording for posterity if we need to go back and we'll run through the facts.
Do you want to just go, do you want to volleyball them? You can go first.
So the first frequently asked question we often get, membership in SWOG. This program is a little bit unique because we are offering it across the entire NCTN. So usually it would require SWOG membership for a funding program through the Hope Foundation, but in this case, it's membership in ECOG, the Alliance. It can be any NCTN group, as long as there will be an impact on the network and the trials that we're all running. We're really keen to have this be an open opportunity. So that's the biggest one, I think.
Yeah, and I think related to that, I'm going to jump to where does the funding go? So the funding would go to your member institution or, either a SWOG member institution or to whatever your institution is. We often work with subcontractors as well, and we would expect largely this to sort of pass through your main institution, although we have awarded funding directly to third-party contracts if it makes more sense for you. But that money would move from the foundation to your institution with the budget that was approved in the submission, and again, capping the indirect cost to 25%, which I know seems like it might be kind of an uphill battle for your site, because I know a lot of investigators get pushback, but we don't, and nor have we ever funded some of the indirect costs, which can be, as you know, I'm sure, incredibly high. Our money is for the research itself and to support our membership. It's not to support IDC, but by capping it at what we think is a reasonable rate, which we do for every institution that we work with, and I can assure you, nobody has ever not taken our grant money. So it always works out at the end of the day. But yeah, sometimes they're as high as 78 to 80. I mean, I've even known a 92% IDC if you don't have a clinic associated with your work. And that's not what we're here for. So we like to really keep it focused on the work, and that's why we cap that IDC. But again, if you do end up with this award and your institution is giving you flack, you can just have them call me because I'll take care of it.
Another question we often get relates to salary support. So there are different types of research and career awards that we fund. For this one, we do anticipate that there's going to be a component that will support salary. We can't really establish infrastructure without covering the cost of the staff who need to do that work. So it's absolutely allowable with these grants.
And then I think that's it. I mean, largely the time frame. A common question, well, laid out in the RFP, these are 1 to 2 year grants. So you're welcome to do the project in the scope of a year or to have 2 years to do it. That would be based on program specific goals of yours. And then specifically in the era of COVID, I mean, I don't even know what that means anymore, but people have been extending. We've been extending right and left, and that no cost extensions are a common thing that we do. I typically will give 2 without even asking questions. Beyond that, it becomes a bit more of a drill down into if the work is getting done. But it's an odd time for research, and timing and the cadence of everything is slowed by things that are beyond our scope and control. So we are certainly amenable to conversation around that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we have any other excuse me, questions that come up. I was trying to sort of drill through my thinking in terms of the questions that I always get asked about, and those are pretty much it. Is there anything else we want to accomplish here, Morgan?
I'm just going to put my email address in the chat, and if there's an interest in reaching out, morgan@thehopefoundation.org. I'm always happy to answer questions or find the answer from someone who knows if I don't.
Yeah, well, you know what? That reminds me of a point that we didn't raise in the FAQ, which is like, what if I have a really good idea, but I don't know how to build a team to do the work? Which I think, I'm having this interesting moment, just to be candid, in looking at funding diversity, equity, inclusion work. If we're doing it wholly and smartly, it really changes the way we do business as administrators as well, right? So whereby we might have an expectation of experts coming to the table with a perfectly formed idea, and then you get that grant in the 10 percentile and they're funded. Like, to me, and I don't mean to speak too outside of the box, but for me, that perpetuates a status quo where we may not be truly diversifying the opportunities to receive our funding. And so this whole process has been a really interesting, reflective, honestly, and sort of recalibration of priorities of funders and philanthropists and of SWOG. So how do we continue to fund good science while at the same time making sure that we really are getting the best message about what good science is? Good science isn't necessarily the cleanest or the most well-written grant, but perhaps with enough support, good science can be, something that is a great idea, but a little rough around the edges. We could really help that. And we're interested in seeing those ideas as well, which is where this conversation and these office hours started, because we want to make ourselves available as a resource. Obviously, we want to fund the best grants that we can come December. I think how the process has really differed for us this year is that we want to help you build a team or connect with other experts or network, places that may typically be off limits or not as accessible for certain populations, and where we can remove those barriers to good, solid applications. We certainly want to be available to do so. And so it's a little bit different, like knock on our door and say, I don't know, and ask us questions, because we'll be happy to say, I don't know, right back. Let's figure it out in the name of getting the best projects funded.
I second that. And I often don't know, but it's nice to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to emphasize what Joe is saying, I think that's one of the reasons why the RFP really was designed in a way to cast a wide net. We don't want people necessarily assuming that they can't apply for this, and to bring some different voices to the table. You're going to have to do some different things and engage some different people. So I really encourage, even if you don't have maybe have all the pieces, but you have a great idea, maybe, reach out and see if we can help you, think about that idea some more, or connect you with some people who might be able to help you. There are not, not everybody's going to be a diversity expert. I mean, it's just everything in this is new in terms of looking at this. So they're not, you know, it doesn't have to be a perfect idea, and we don't necessarily, you know, have the experts in absolutely everything, but maybe we can connect you with some people who know some things. So I really want to encourage different people to come to the table to have this discussion.
Absolutely. Well, I'm interested if we have any other questions. I would love to hear what those might be, if anyone does.
Give it another minute of radio silence.
Yeah, otherwise I know we could always let people have their time back and prepare for plenary 2, which is going to be an excellent one today, I think.
All right, I think we can sign off, calling attention to all of the details in the chat. If you've just joined, there's a lot of information there.
Yep. Oh, did we just, maybe I froze or Joe froze. Oh, and Allison, you might be muted. Oh, everyone's back.
Oh, did I froze for a second? Actually,
Okay.
hasn't happened much that week, so I'm grateful.
That's good.
All right. Well, I think we can sign off and have this for resource, as well as the chat info. And
Yep. I will stick around for a few more minutes and direct anyone with any information if needed. But otherwise, see everyone later and see you at plenary 2 or wherever you're going to go.
okay, I'm back, but I'm going to hang up before I totally bomb this meeting. I think it's my internet.
All right. Bye. Thanks to you both.
Bye. Bye, Morgan.
Bye, Allison. Well, that was a tiny little crew, but thank you, Jim.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, hold on. Forgot to stop recording.